Hello, VK3ZVX here. I've just acquired this little radio. It's a receiver type 78 used by the Royal Air Force in some of their aircraft, including the Sunderland flying boat. So I thought this would be a rather interesting addition to my collection of World War II radios. And I've just taken delivery of it, and it appears to be in quite reasonable condition. Now, the purpose of this radio is that it's not a full receiver in the usual sense. It's actually a shortwave converter. So it's got a shortwave front end in it in two bands, 2.4 to about 5.9 and 5.8 to about 13 megahertz. And it converts those frequencies down to about 560 kilohertz. And the 560 kilohertz detector is contained in another unit, which was part of the system, or what they call the 4-square system. So it had a transmitter and modulator unit and two of these receiver units, one for a long wave and one for short wave, or medium wave and short wave, something like that. So just taking a look at this radio from the outside, I can see that the outside casing is in pretty good condition on that side, certainly on the other side. The back is also in good condition. It's got a 12-pin dual inline Jones connector with a couple of centering pins on it. That appears to be in good condition. The underside is also in good condition, and it's got these earthing tracks. Now these are just exposed sections of the casing. They haven't been painted, and the idea is that when you insert this into its cradle, there's electrical contact made on the outside of the case to the cradle and then to the airframe, and so that keeps the entire radio earthed, or at least static free. Now there are a couple of markings on the top of the radio, on the top of the case. One of them is very much like a shadow. It's a little bit hard to tell what the origin of it is, but it appears to read something like OA/1-795. Now that could be some kind of designation for the manufacturer's part number on the box, or it could be any number of things really, or it could be something that just has been added later. It looks a little bit like a shadow left behind by a Dymo label. I don't know whether you've ever seen those on the front of a filing cabinet or something. When you take the Dymo label off, it leaves this kind of trace of whatever was on it. But there's another marking in here, a stamp, and it's a little bit hard to make out. I've had it under the microscope, and I've got a USB connected microscope here, and it looks like D and SB 100 in an oval circle. Now I can't be certain of the lettering on that. I'm going to have to examine it some more, but it looks like it could be a quality assurance mark or a manufacturer's inspection mark, something like that. Right, so moving around to the front of the radio, I can see that a serial number has been inscribed on the top. There's no compliance plate, and it appears to be serial number 3914, and there's something after that. It could be a 1 or an A, possibly an H, but serial number 3914 something. So there's that sort of little piece of provenance that I want to try and record and keep if I possibly can. Now the front panel appears to be completely intact. All the controls and knobs and so on are all there. All the markings are still visible, but there is a bit of a problem with restoring a front panel like this. Some panels restore more easily than others. Stamped panels, for example, tend to restore very well. because there's a procedure you can go through, but you can actually recover the lettering perfectly. This, on the other hand, appears to have been screen printed, and that causes a problem because screen printing doesn't really lend itself well to restoration unless you've got an extremely fine brush and an extremely steady hand. There's no question of getting hold of the original screen print. That's completely impossible. But with a steady hand and a bit of patience, it should be possible to bring back some of this lettering, and there are also other things you can do as well. So really it's about increasing the contrast. Now this is a steel front panel, which means it's got corrosion behind the paintwork, which is lifting the paintwork away. So ideally what you'd want to do would be to remove the paintwork, put a rust converter or something on the surface to get rid of the rust expansion, but that might not be possible either. We'll just have to see how we go when we get the thing apart. And I think that just about takes care of the outside. Oh, except that there are two windows here. There's the dial window here, the main tuning window, and this little window here, which is the RF tuning window. So this is the dial face for the master oscillator. That's this control here, and this is the window for the RF amplifier. Now this is what you might call a pre-selector control or something of that nature, but the two stages in the radio are tuned independently of each other. This little window is not too bad. It's still transparent, enough that you can read the numbers behind it, but it has yellowed quite a bit. When I get the front panel apart, it might be possible to clean that and clean some of the muck off the back of it. We'll see how that goes. But this window here, unfortunately, it's come away at the edge. It's concaved in, and it's very, very discoloured and crazed, and I would say that this window will need to come out and be replaced by something possibly perspex or polycarbonate, something like that. I think you can still get acetate sheets, but down the track you're going to have the same problem. Anyway, the radio is probably 80 years old, so if I do replace it with acetate sheet, that will probably be okay as well. There's only one modification that I can see, and that's just here. This is the antenna input connector. It's not original, as you can see. It appears to be a UHF, I think it's a DIN socket, something off a television set or possibly an automobile radio, something like that. But I think I'd probably remove that, and I've already had a look inside this radio despite appearances, but that will probably be replaced with an SO239 receptacle. Rightio. So if I turn the radio around, on the back here we've got a single Zeus connector, or I think that's the pronunciation. It's spelled DZUS, and it's a simple snap lock device. So a quarter turn, and it releases, and now the radio can be taken out of the box. Just set the box aside, and as you can see, the chassis appears to be complete. There are no holes or gaps, and things appear to be in quite good condition. So just taking it all one step at a time, this up here appears to be the 100 kilohertz marker oscillator. Now this is a 100 kilohertz crystal. If my guess is correct, this will be the 100 kilohertz oscillator, which is probably a pentode that will then produce a lot of harmonics. There'll be some kind of tuning arrangement in here, and this produces a picket fence of 100 kilohertz increments right across the shortwave band, and so you can use that to calibrate the tuning on the front panel. This tube here is a 6J5 triode. That will be the master oscillator, and this compartment here underneath appears to be where all the tuning takes place. Now I can't see inside that. I don't think it's ever been opened. It's not exactly sealed, but it would be a hell of a job getting it out of the chassis. So I'm fingers crossed that it doesn't require any attention, and that it's still operational. But the fact that they've gone to so much trouble to seal it up like that tends to suggest that it's a highly stable oscillator configuration, and that wouldn't surprise me at all. Over on the other side, this is the RF tuning gang, which you can see there. This is the pre-selector control just here. It's a little stiff, needs some lubrication, but that's to be expected. The underneath wiring all seems to be intact. All the components are still there, nothing's been chopped or hacked out. The tubes, this is an EF50, which was a mainstay of most of British military communications during the war. It's a pentode. This device is an ARTH2, it's a converter tube, possibly a pentagrid converter, but I haven't looked it up yet, we'll find out. I don't know what the other tube is on the other side yet, the marker oscillator. I'm not sure what that tube is, but there are 4 tubes in this in all, unless you count this little fellow in here, which appears to be a flash diode. Now that's my word for it, but it's a protection diode, and I think it's got something to do with the fact that this was an aircraft radio and they were concerned about lightning strike, that sort of thing. So this diode was designed to take the hit if the aircraft got struck by lightning, and that way the rest of the circuitry and the receiver would be protected. At least I think that was what it was for. It's a guess, but it's an educated one. And finally, if we have a look just around the other side again, there's this funny looking creature. Now I can lift it out. It's in an octal socket, and I haven't seen one of these for years, and this is possibly one of the first examples of this ever been in service. This, believe it or not, is a 3-phase electric motor. It's a 3-phase electric motor. It's got 3 input terminals to control the motor, and on the end of the motor there's a small tuning gang. Now it's marked as being 12 volts, but that would probably be 12 volts at about 400 cycles AC. So instead of where we have 50 cycles here in Australia or 60 cycles in America, this would have 400 cycles, and that would be generated within the aircraft. Now the idea of this is really clever. On the pilot's cockpit position, there is another one of these which has got a knob attached to it, and that would be on the remote control unit for this radio. So when you adjust the knob on the pilot's control console, the synchro motor, as it's called, gets moved, and then this synchro motor, because that's what it is, moves in synchronization with the one in the pilot's position, and so the pilot is able to make fine adjustments to the tuning of this radio simply by moving a knob in the cockpit. Now I haven't seen one of those for years, and I had no idea that they were in the Sunderlands as early as that. But if you look closely, you can see the designator on it. It says DSYN, DESYNN trimmer, 12 volt, and it's got a serial number. And inside this, as I said, there is a tuning capacitor, a small tuning capacitor, and if you look into the circuitry, you can see a cable or wire coming down from the socket and going into the part of the circuit where the master oscillator is, and that would be the fine tuning adjustment for the pilot's control position. So that's a real artifact and possibly the earliest example of this that I've ever seen. And there it goes. So it would be interesting to experiment with that and see if I can get it working, but I'd need another servo motor or something similar to get that up and going. But anyway, so what am I intending to do with this? Well, as I said before, it operates from about 2.4 megahertz to about 13 megahertz, and that should give me AM, CW and single sideband on the 80, 40 and 30 metre bands. But in order to get this going, or to get any sound out of it, it needs a detector circuit, possibly a regenerative detector circuit, which would be a single pentode tube. That would be easy to do, and it would operate on 560 kilohertz, so a fixed frequency regenerative detector. That would be pretty straightforward, followed by an audio amplifier and a power supply. Now, because this was designed to slide into a rack, as I said before on the rails here, it's designed to slide into a rack in the Sunderland aircraft, so I thought, why not build a rack? And I can do that here in the workshop. So I'd have a flat plate here with an edge on it, and on the side possibly a box about as half the width of this one down the side here, and that would contain the power supply, 560 kilohertz detector, audio amplifier, speaker, volume control, all of those sorts of ancillary items. And then this radio could go on the air, assuming of course that it works okay. I don't see any reason why it shouldn't. It looks like it's all there. So that was my first look inside a Sunderland Type 78 shortwave receiver. Thank you for watching, and I'll post something else soon. So this is VK3ZVX calling 73s, and cheers to you all.